It's all right. So, pleasure to be here, introduce myself, and what we are talking about today. We're talking about charting the course for AI governance. In a second, I'll tell you a little bit more about what that means. First, let me introduce ourselves. I've got with me today Collin Hill, who is the CIO for the City of Indianapolis, which is a really big deal, by the way. One of the things I think a lot of folks don't know about being a CIO in a large organization like the City of Indianapolis is that in Indiana, we have what's called a unified government. So we have both the City of Indianapolis and the County of Marion. So Collin actually has the responsibility for not only overseeing what happens in the mayor's administration, but also in the judicial side of the house, all the county offices. So think of your treasurers, your sheriffs. And there's about 72 different bosses, I think is what he tells me that he has.
That's right, yeah.
To report to. But on top of that, Collin has a phenomenal resume. He's worked in the private sector. He's worked for higher education. He's a security guy by trade, and I always tell everybody the two hardest in IT are security and networking. So you got a smart man up here that's going to tell us a lot of good information today about charting the course for AI governance. But let me tell you a little bit about myself as well. So my name is Michael Hart. I'm the director for end user computing solutions here at SHI by day. By night, I am also a city county councilor in the city of Indianapolis. So I work on large things like trying to bring new MLS stadiums to the city of Indianapolis, but also making sure that we're filling potholes. So kind of like Batman. All right, maybe not as cool as Batman. But at any rate, today we're going to talk about charting the course for AI governance and how all this really came to be and why it started is, I think everybody's aware that ChatGPT blew up, 6-9 months ago, and now we're seeing all these innovations in the marketplace, which led me to reach out to Collin in the city and say, hey, Collin, like, what are we doing? How can we prepare the city the best for this insurgence of artificial intelligence? How can we prepare, to protect the folks that work here, the folks in the city? How can we take advantage of the tools and the innovation coming along? And from there on, Collin and I basically just hit it off, and we've done a lot since then. And so we'll jump into a couple of things here. First thing I want to do, though, is go through some polls. I want to keep you on your toes today. I want to see you. I want to see eyes. I want to see some answers. But softballs first. So if we look at our first one, easy question. How likely will you be to adopt AI productivity tools like Microsoft Copilot to enhance your workflows and efficiencies? All right, I like the on-screen here. The
instant
promptness.
Yeah.
All right, seeing some, looking good, very likely. Well, this is perfect. So this is good to know because this actually helps the content we're going to tell you about is a little bit retroactive is what I think I'm seeing in places, but folks like Collin have been a very proactive. And so when we start diving into our first question, Collin, I got to ask you, when it comes to framework and policies, what really needs to be established to ensure ethical, responsible development for AI governance within an organization?
So our organization is a little unique. I'll try not to do that again. Sorry. So we have a information technology board, which is whom I directly report to. And so any policies from an enterprise level have to go up to this technology board. And in about August or September of last year, we were seeing kind of an increased usage of AI throughout the city, county, at least like it was becoming apparent that it was being used. So we had to make a choice of like, how do you give guidance to 8,000 people on how to use AI? There is some capabilities within our government where there are different department heads, and there's some leeway that they have to bring in new technologies with little to no involvement or from us. So it was, hey, let's put out something that talks about all the needs and requirements for AI and make it so that it's possible for people to bring it in, because we need to know, you're looking at this technology, we all know how impactful it's going to be, or at least we have ideas, right? This can change the game for all of us. And in local government, where we have a shortage of workers, a shortage of time, it is really important to make the best use of any time that we have. So getting some guidance out there for them was really important for us. So we put out a policy that was essentially very generic, and the technology board that I mentioned earlier was who approved it. But it said, hey, there are innate concerns with AI, whether it's developer bias, whether it's the ethics of how it's done, sustainability issues with the data centers themselves. And that's just to name a few off the top. So it basically called out like all the different types of AI. It said, hey, here are some concerns. There are certainly more that will be coming data, every day from here on out. But and then getting that communication out to the enterprise was the key piece there. One thing that we do have internally is we have a committee of all the different business units within our organization. And that committee was instrumental in developing and saying, yes, this will work for us, so it wouldn't impact them in a negative way, but also gave them the guidance necessary to keep things going.
So these policies you created in the documents, are they stagnant? Are they dynamic? Like, tell me a little bit more about the documents.
That's a great question. So, it's pretty formal policy in a city county where we have to have like this full review of a 9-member committee to get this done. But the great thing about our policies and the levers that the IT board gave us was that we could make this a living document. So it didn't require to go back to them to be updated. If there was a new development that was out there, and really with AI, there's going to be tons of different developments that occur. So we're able to update it and communicate that out to everyone as it comes, as developments happen.
I think that's extremely realistic, right? I mean, I think everybody here's probably seen it too, right? The advancement. I mean, we were talking about just processors earlier and those top speed, just that exponential growth. I mean, what we see changing is going to be exponential. And so those policies have to change and stay up to date as the new technology updates as well. So when we look at the public sector and we look at AI for good, what are some of the practices to mitigate potential risks like bias, discrimination, and privacy violations? And this can happen within an organization too. It's not just so much in the public sector, but what are the things that you're looking at in your organization to help avoid those risks?
So that's a great question. So there's a couple things that we're looking at, but I think one of the things that we started, that you started, was an AI commission at the city county, and we're looking at the different options there, and through that we've had different conversations, and one of those was looking at the risk of the data involved that you're putting AI on. So it's almost like a matrix, right? You go for the low-hanging fruit. The data that you know about, there was a question earlier from the gentleman about data and how scary that was. I am super afraid of all the data in the city county. There's a lot of it. But you go with the data that you know, and you go for that low-hanging fruit. And so, and then as you get comfortable with the technology, you build into the more complex data. The last thing I want as a CIO is to put out some data that is going to give a bunch of information from residents or even from elected officials that we're trying to hold on to. So, you go with the easy use cases, you see the benefits there, and you keep moving forward. That's how we're going to look to avoid it. Some of those things that you mentioned, I think it's also going through and making sure that we are making sure that like the terms that you agree to with contracts, I deal with a lot of contracts, so looking at the data contracts that are there, make sure the terms are agreeable, that there's protection from breaches, that there's protection from a loss of data, that there's easy termination language, because if someone starts to do something, like technology is changing all the time, if there's a way to hop out of a contract quickly when someone tries to do something different that you're uncomfortable with, you can get out of it.
Even data sharing, right? I mean, we had an experience where, we were trying to work with the police department in the city of Indianapolis and utilize good, and we realized that there's multiple vendors that have multiple contracts about the data usage and how it can be used, that the ultimate solution we were trying to get to was blocked by the contractual language on that data even.
That's right. So yeah, and sharing data between vendors, even if it is our data, is the language good enough so that I can pull data from this one that was derived from this one solution into another solution to look at the data? It's a challenge, right? And maybe they want to develop their own type of AI solution, and then to swing it over to a different one is, what does that look like? And we found out that it was a little challenging with those contracts. So there's always keeping that in mind as well. I know that's probably not at the level that you think about all the time, but it's really important to make sure that that data is usable by whatever entity you're supporting. Yeah.
And then just to finish up on this, it was
Yeah.
a broad question. So on the third part of it,
Yeah.
we were talking about bias, and I want to make sure we talk about that a little bit because it comes up. We've heard a couple examples, but what are some of the techniques that could be used in place to prevent bias within using the AI tool sets?
So for us, it comes down to an awareness of it. It comes down to having, when we're approving of that technology, it's making sure that we have a group that is a committee of sorts that is making sure that from a legal and ethical, from even our DEI side within the Office of Equity, Belonging, and Inclusion, like having them look at it and make sure that we're doing a solution that's appropriate for the city county. So it's really just bringing in multiple levels of different talented people to take a look at those solutions.
Absolutely. And I think some of our previous presenters alluded to this with the book example, right? Where, I mean, hallucinations are real and they happen all the time. And there's a concept called putting a human in the loop to review that data. Don't trust it, right? And move forward with it. Well, so we'll go on to our next polling question here. Remember, I gave you the softball first, so we're going to kick it up a notch here. And we're going to go to this one. So how familiar are you with the concept of AI governance? And we know we've been talking a lot about the tools, the cool things you can do with use cases, but who's thinking about the policies and really getting into that protection phase? Okay. I think I was expecting about a 50-50 split here. And we're getting there. All right, that's good feedback, really good feedback. It looks like some people like to read a lot, maybe some just like to go for it. So next one here, how can the public sector, or really any organization again, ensure transparency in AI decision-making process used in areas, in our case, it could be social services or law enforcement, but it could also be in sales or finance or accounting in another organization.
That's right.
And I think I'm going to say a couple words here just in terms of what we've done so far in the city, if there's any other folks here. But early on, I was alluding to Collin and I, getting together last year, and we created a commission to actually study the development of artificial intelligence and how to implement that properly into the city of Indianapolis. In which what we did was we created a 6-month process, which we're absolutely going to have to expand at this point in time because it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of bits, moving pieces to it. But you see a lot, and what we've seen a lot in that commission is folks coming from a lot of machine learning background, and where there's historical knowledge of AI or traditional. But when we start getting into these generative approaches or computer vision approaches, that some of that experience we've learned transfers over. But the purpose of this commission was to bring in the experts, right? Bring in the folks who are living and breathing this stuff every day to help give us the frameworks for setting up the decision-making process on use case, for understanding the risks that are associated with those, for building out these committees, the policies, and reviewing what's really important to protect organizations and citizens, as well as the employees that work within our organization, to make sure that what we're doing is very transparent. So the commission itself, right, is there to be public information. It's publicly recorded on television. The reports are public as well.
You can go watch it right now if you want to. Yeah.
As exciting as it is. But I'll turn it over to you, Collin, right? I mean, what are some of the other things that can be done to ensure transparency in AI beyond a commission?
So I think some of the things that we're looking at potentially as a commission recommendation to the city county, or even just within my organization within the city county, is looking at, hey, which applications actually are backed by AI? Do we have to report on these? Do we have to put them out and say, hey, these are all the applications that we have? And one of the challenges that I think is coming is, every application, every line of business application is going to end up with some sort of AI feature in it. So do we end up listing all of those out there? How do we ensure that? I think there's some need to do that from a transparency point, to say, hey, these are those. But when we have 600 plus applications in the city county enterprise, do I just put all those applications out there? But if I put all those applications out there from a security standpoint, then every threat actor out there knows that we have, hey, this application X, application Y, and it makes it really easy for them to figure out how to attack us. So there's a little give and take there. So there's some sort of effort between transparency. It's kind of like the CIA triangle if you're in security, right? Like how much of this do we have to put out there? And it really comes into knowing and going through approval processes with those committees and with those people to say, hey, these are approved for work within the city, county, or whatever enterprise you're in, right? Like there's just whatever you can do to get more eyes and hands on it, and I think is important to get buy-in from your stakeholders and from the public, in my case, to make sure that we're doing things in the right way.
Certainly. So
Yeah.
we'll move into one that maybe might put some heads on the chopping block here. And
Oh.
so when it comes to accountability for those decisions being made of what comes open, what goes into those portals, what's the liabilities, who's accountable for the decisions made by AI systems that are implemented?
That's a really challenging question if you think about it. It's hard to point a finger at one individual. So I think in our enterprise, it ends up likely being myself because we don't have a chief AI officer. I know that that's something that's a lot of enterprises are looking at creating and doing. But we have an IT board, we have elected officials. So ultimately, I'm working to make sure that the responsibility falls onto the technology side and that we're putting the whole enterprise, the public, in the best position possible. But ultimately, it really comes down to whoever that technology lead is, or in some cases, there are going to be people who are always out there in the shadow ITs of the world that are going to stand up something that you may not have known about. And at that point, is it really your responsibility? I think that you've created an environment where it's happened, so there is some responsibility there. But I think that one's going to be out there for a while to decide across, and it's different for every enterprise. What do you think?
So I'm thinking of delegation of tasks,
Sure.
right? So I come from a background IT. I was an engineer architect for a long time, and there's never one group that is responsible for an entire project. And I think everybody's probably aware of that. So when it comes to AI, is it going to be any different within the city of Indianapolis? Or if you could wave your magic wand, right, and say this is the best way it could be, how would you really, delegate those tasks out?
That's interesting. I really think that we probably should set up an AI committee internally that is for the entire city county that goes through those approval processes, and it's kind of a shared responsibility between those people. But like any project, there's going to be people who succeed in a project and who fail in a project. But and so that responsibility will ultimately be shared across people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking you got data people, you've
Oh,
got
yeah.
infrastructure people, the storage, right? It's all in the network.
Yeah, we talked about the data earlier and how wild it is. I've been talking with other CIOs and with other people within Indiana. It's just like all of our data is a mess, and the enabling AI there is really scary, and no one's had good control of it. So one of our strategic priorities has been to get on top of our data, make sure that we're classifying it appropriately, that it is being tracked, to really actually set up that data warehouse that we all talked about like 15 years ago. It's actually being set up now, and to make sure that people understand their roles with data lifecycle between data custodians, data stewards, you name it, so that the data owners, and if they're sharing data, make that available in an appropriate way, make sure that there's lifecycle on that as well. And then if you put in those foundational controls, those foundational pieces that are needed that may have been overlooked up to this point to enable AI as a technology, I think is really important.
Absolutely. And we're going to move into our last poll question here, and then we'll get into our final question, which I think is one of the most fun ones to talk about. All right, so final poll question. Here we go. This is the hard one, right? No more softballs. Does your organization have a process for prioritizing AI use cases based on data availability, business value, and solution complexity? I'm impressed.
I want to talk to the person that has a well-defined process. That's awesome.
That's what I was looking for, the well-defined. I thought that was on top. But no, this is what I was expecting here. And this one it's interesting, right? Really, because to know all the data that you have available, knowing the risks associated with that potential use case. I mean, in our case, it's what we've derived from this is we're not going to anything that's going to impact a human's life first.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
We will look at potholes and things of that nature before we start worrying about 911 calls and that. But I agree. This is no defined. I'm not too surprised by here, but a lot of room to grow and learn from here. So last question: how can I'm going to say it's public engagement is what I have written down, but it's not so much from the citizens here because we have a broad audience, but even employee engagement be fostered to ensure that AI systems and use cases are developed in a way that align with the values of an organization or with the values of a city.
So that is a really good question, and certainly multifaceted, right? And there's multiple ways to attack it. So currently there is we've taken this approach where we're getting information from the enterprise as a whole. So one of the other departments is engaging the enterprise and asking them, what AI interests they have, what applications that they're looking to do that may have AI involved, and we're going to be reporting on this poll to the AI Commission here pretty soon. It's kind of one of those things where I'm on the commission, then also making sure that this poll takes place and help write the questions for it. So we're going to get a lot of good feedback from the enterprise as a whole, depending on that, and at different levels, right? Because you have your directors levels, you have your managers, you have your workers, and you have frontline workers. And getting those opinions from everybody, I think, is really important to understand how it can benefit the organization as a whole. Moving further into that, as we look at, we talked a little bit about committees earlier and potentially setting up a separate internal AI committee. So we have within the city county, we have for my department, we have what's called functional groups, and we divide up the city county into 5 different use cases. So there's justice, public safety, property and land management, constituent services, and I think most organizations can divide their businesses, or they're already divided into those different groups to understand those different use cases, how they can apply AI and all of its facets into their organizations. I think is really important.
So what stands out to me is, one, get the survey, right?
Yeah.
And hearing back from the people within the organization, but also the culture behind it. Because I think there's a stigma related to it as well, where, and one of the benefits that I see for the city is being able to improve the efficiency, right? We always struggle with having enough people within the organization, right? We have space for 10, but we can only fill 7, right? So how can we make 7 as efficient as 10? But we also get the other side of that, which is AI is going to take my job, right? I'm sure we've heard that. How do you plan to overcome that concern, that fear?
That's a really great question. I actually skipped over that when I was thinking about how I was going to answer it. So we're working on creating a training, I think, for everyone within the enterprise, and it's not that I was just kind of thinking about how it's going to be rolled out. But that generative AI training is something I think that's important to get people to accept the technology, to understand how it can be used, how it can help them. When I look at all the people that work with me, we're all wearing multiple hats. We're all doing so many different things in day to day. I've literally written an RFP myself, and to look at AI as a potential thing to just give me the framework to write it and to take hours off of my day just to put that out there, I think is really important. Contracting, we were talking earlier about just helping with contracts to give you have your boilerplate, but depending on the type of contract, you can just toggle things on. The people who are writing emails, responding to emails, doing meetings, project managers, it's going to benefit everybody. And that's just all the lightweight stuff. That's not even the really cool things that AI can do. It can save us so much time within the city county.
I'm the same way, and it's you couple that with some of these other technologies, the augmented realities that come out, and I always think about the different types of employees at a city, right? You've got folks that are working on vehicles, all the way up to folks that are attorneys in the office, and there's going to be a use case for all of them. Maybe some late adopters, maybe some early adopters, but ultimately the goal is to enhance the efficiencies at the end of the day.
That's right.
All right, so we've got a minute left here. Closing remarks. Anything that you would like to share with folks, or from a policy perspective, governance perspective, best use cases, anything that you'd like to share and leave them with?
So that's pretty open, but it's funny to me to be in a position after having worked in 20 years in IT, where from the sysadmin up to this position, and now I'm impacting policy on such an emerging technology, and that's going to change everything. And I think think of wherever you are in the organization, think of the impact that these technologies can have for the good, for the bad, being aware of of how they can impact everybody's day to day, and keep aware of the concerns that are out there. It's always exciting, but you never know when you're going to be in a situation to inform or to help somebody. So I guess that's probably it. That's kind of a softball, but yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right. You closed us out well.
Yeah.
We absolutely appreciate the partnership with the City of Indianapolis, and I enjoy our friendship working together and trying to solve these big problems with the city. Appreciate your time today, and thank you very much, Collin.
Thank you, Mike. Yep.